There we go.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us today. There will be a few more people, I think, joining us in the next few minutes, but we're going to make a start anyway, because that's just 4 o'clock just now. So this session is an information session on the 2 SCQF level 4 courses, as the slide says. And so we'll be going through some information, basic information on those courses. There's opportunity for you to ask questions as well. And because you are here, we obviously want to hear from you. So there'll be a couple of ways for you to speak to us or get involved. Please do feel free, if you want to ask a question, to turn your microphone on or put the question into the chat. So the 2 SCQF courses are Climate Emergency Training, Biodiversity Action course. So if that's the things you're interested in, you're in the right place. They're both set at level 4 in, will slides be shared? The recording will be shared. So both of these courses are set at level 4, and that was accredited by the SQA. So the SCQF is the bit that we talk about because it's their framework that they sit in. So it's the level 4 in the SCQF framework, but it's Keep Scotland Beautiful that developed and runs and owns the courses. So it's us that issues the certificates. So for this session today, we'll do a little bit of the course rationale, sort of like why, and then, or you probably have some ideas on that already. And then there are some similarities between the courses and the administration processes. Then we'll look a little bit at some outlines of the actual courses. Then there'll be time for questions and going through any FAQs. Josh and I are going to split the session today, so I'll be chatting with you first of all, and then I'll hand over to Josh. So, without ado, talking about the rationale. In fact, you know, this is the question that we're going to be coming to. But before we do that, now, hold on a minute. I need to shift screens because I need to launch a poll.
I can fill in for a few seconds if you want, Eve, or are you?
That's right. I'm just moving. I'm moving screens around so I can find the poll again. Because when you started it, it overlaid what I was already looking at. So this is, in case you've not used polls, this is just a bit of fun to get us finding out where and how these things work. I'm going to launch this poll and please just fill in. So you read the question and you submit your answers. So a little pop-up box should have appeared on your screen, and the question is, my best breakfast includes ... So we want to hear your best breakfast items. It can include non-food items, but yeah, you might want to make some of those up rather than being there we go, marmalade in big bold letters. And you can put in multiple. That's the other thing you can do here. So if you've got 2 or 3 best breakfast items, put 2 or 3 in. And if you're inspired by somebody, maybe you agree, oh yes, marmalade is the thing, then you can also say marmalade. They don't all have to be different. So there should be more results coming in. There is unfortunately often a bit of a time lag on this as people are putting things in.
See, Anne's written swimming in the chat.
Okay. So if you can put your results into the wee box that pops up on the screen, and then there's a bit at the bottom, it says enter your response there. Oh, it won't accept it. Oh, okay. I'm going to put it in for you then, Anne.
Oh, so I think it looks like a few councils Eve may have actually blocked the poll bot. So it might actually be really difficult for our teachers to use that function, unfortunately.
Okay. That's very frustrating. Okay, then never mind. what we're going to do. I wonder why that's not working. Well, that's a bit frustrating. Okay, but moving on, we're going to go on. If that's not working, we'll go on to the actual question that was a practice for. It's not working for anybody. Okay, so in that case, if we can't use the polls, can we just continue to use the chat?
That should be fine. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll get rid of the chat and we'll the polls will use the chat there. So this is the actual question that we were practicing for. What words would you use to describe the biodiversity and climate crises to an alien, but with the proviso that the alien only understands nouns? You can only use nouns to describe the biodiversity and climate crises. So think about the elements that you might expect to find in either of those situations. Yep, water, rain. Yep, emergency, yep. Species, okay. Anything about the species? Planet, planetary wide. Unique roles. Threat. Thank you. And nature. Okay. So we've got a critical, man-made, habitable. These are really great nouns. Yeah. And in the middle of this, I beg your pardon, I've lost the other screen. Here we go. Puzzle, like that. Okay, so there's quite a few emotive words here. They're nouns, but actually critical, tipping point, puzzle, emergency. They're all words that kind of imply that there might well be a reaction to these. It's not something that's distant from us. So with that in mind, how are you feeling about the biodiversity and climate crises? And you can put 2 or 3 emotions in, and I've got a little list here. So it might be any of those. It might be something different, but just have a wee scan of this list of despondent, troubled, concerned. Okay. Worried. Oh, infuriated. Okay, yeah. So there's a range. Hopeful. Thank you, Miss Muir. Quite a range of feelings across the board, and it's kind of important that we acknowledge these. It's one of the things that I think differentiates learning about these crises from learning about, say, the 18th century. And this is not to say it's not interesting. I think it's a lot to do with, because when we learn about the biodiversity and climate crises, there's also that part of the learning that means we might have to change how we behave, and we might not have to change how we behave just by how we decline a verb, for example. But when we learn about how our actions are impacting on the world, then it may have further implications, and therefore it's more personal, and therefore our emotions get involved. So that's us, and it's important to acknowledge kind of where we're at as teachers about this stuff, because when we go into this, if we're faced with different situations as we learn, then some of that may, it may become not triggered, but it may be there in the background. So it's important to be aware of it. So that's us. But what about your pupils? What do you think your pupils would say to describe the biodiversity and climate crises? What are words that they would use? Thank you. Unsure. Does that mean that they would say unsure, Miss Muir? Confused? Or are you unsure about what they would say? Oh, non-existent. Oh, wow. Okay. Irrelevant.
Sorry, I was thinking that they would be unsure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Confused. Okay. Most worried. Yeah. Okay. So what we're getting here is that they're not necessarily using words that describe the climate crises because they're not sure about it, or the biodiversity crisis because they're not sure about it. And we've already started to move on to some of the emotions, because that's obviously where we go next, is what would you say they're feeling about the crisis? And you've already started to identify that some are worried and some perhaps a bit annoyed. This thing you're mentioning there, Nancy, about blame, frustration perhaps. And I don't know if the non-existent maybe is to do with a bit of a denial. I don't know. Okay, some do deny there's a problem. Okay. And some are apathetic. Okay. And they don't feel the urgency as they've been growing up during it. Okay, so it's not new for them. Okay. Or indeed, if they're not sure what to do about it, or how they can make a difference, then again, that's difficult. Fantastic. These are just brilliant answers. Thank you very much. So we've talked about the emotions that are triggered by this, but how does that then affect our approach to learning and teaching about these issues? That's the next bit. What does that mean? What are the implications for how we learn and teach about this? If that is the emotional state of the students as we come to them, what are the implications? What's the impact of that on how we teach about these crises? I can see lots of people are typing, so I'm going to give you a moment. Okay, so showing them that it is real, and then giving hope, developing motivation. Brilliant. That it's necessary. Okay. Fitting it again, the challenges of fitting into a full curriculum. A renewed focus. Thank you. Thank you, and that's so bringing these crises into relations so that it relates to things you're already teaching is fantastic. Yes, it's not just global; it affects us as well. How relevant it is. Brilliant. That's a great word, Gail. Thank you so much for that. I'm just going to click on to the next couple of slides, which a little bit about a framework that helps us to get hold of this. And please do feel free, if this framework is useful for you, to use with your pupils, to just to use this. So here, this is called an arousal valence model. And so we've got 4 quadrants effectively, and the vertical axis is the arousal one, or I like to call it intensity. So it's low intensity at the bottom, or low energy at the bottom, and higher at the top. And the valence is the horizontal axis. And that basically means it's the progression of an emotion from something that we experience as unpleasant, moving towards the right to something that we feel, that we quite enjoy. In some instances, you can see this model where that horizontal axis describes the emotions as negative or positive. I'm not comfortable with labeling emotions as negative, to be honest, because things like anger tends to be described as negative, but actually it can, if we harness that anger, we can use it in all sorts of positive ways. So try not to put that value judgment on it, but we do experience them as unpleasant or pleasant. So just as a wee go just now, we've got 4 different emotions, and we're going to have a play with putting them into the relevant quadrant. So we've got unpleasant to pleasant, we've got high energy or intensity up here and low down here. Where do you think alarm? Oh, no, crikey. I might not be able to move that. So yes. So what we're going to do then is, if you just say where you would want, or what colour you would want alarmed to go in, goes into red. Thank you very much. How about delighted? Where does delighted go? That goes into the orange one, says Sheila. Yeah, okay. The yellow or the orange goes for, and saying the calm is in the green, so it's lower energy and quite pleasant, and bored is in the purple. So we don't particularly enjoy being bored, and it's lower sorts of intensity. Brilliant. Okay, and Nancy's agreeing with us all. Fantastic. So that's an activity that you can do to start getting familiar with this framework. And I've added a few more in there so that you can look at how you could compare different ways of describing similar emotions. So we've got alarmed, which was there, which possibly has more intensity than being resentful or annoyed or just annoyed. And again, some of this will be, it's just how we interpret those emotions, but that's our way of coming to an agreement or an understanding about what we mean by these words and how they fit into this framework. What that means in terms of how we use it, if we've got a class and they're all saying emotions, I feel this, and they're all in the top bit, they're all in the red or the yellow, then there's quite high energy around it. So we don't necessarily need to put as much in. If it's all underneath the horizontal axis, then clearly, as I think you've already said, there may well be a need to put a bit of motivation in there to inspire people. And in terms of the vertical axes, where we experience things as positive, we tend to be drawn towards them. It's a kind of like a proactive movement. I really want that to happen. I enjoy that. I want to do that again. Whereas on the other side, the motivation factor is more about moving away from something. I don't like that. I don't want to feel it again. So it's different ways that we can manipulate or work with where people are at. And it's kind of helpful sometimes to get a handle on that. Because as I've said, people in the class might well have like a baseline of emotion about the topic before you even start. So, course similarities. Delivery. So in both courses, the work is teacher-led, and resources are provided. So there's a whole host of activities. Obviously, the learning outcomes and the assessment criteria are provided, but there's a whole host of activities and other resources that are provided to support the teaching. It's not mandatory that you use those resources. If you already have ways that you prefer of teaching some of those learning outcomes, please do use them. In terms of the assessment, we do have pro formas. Sometimes there's templates for the students to complete. But again, please don't be bound by that. If we would in fact love pupils to put their work in all sorts of creative ways, to submit stories or films, or we want to encourage creativity, or young people to express what they, their answers as they want to. So the sharing of evidence, how do we get to see their work? Because in terms of the assessment, that is split. That's one of the differences. But in terms of the evidence that is marked by a trainer at Keep Scotland Beautiful, ideally that is done over Teams in Glow, and can theoretically be done by using a Google Classroom. But we prefer using Teams because we basically then use our Glow email address for the communication. If we go down the Google Classroom route, then we need to have approval from your local authority, and it means basically then we would have like 32 different permissions attached to our emails, which is much more difficult for us to manage, having 32 different ways of contacting somebody rather than just the one or two. The assessment side of things is split between the school and the trainer, Keep Scotland Beautiful trainer, and there's assessment criteria. Oh, there's a question here. Fiona, can teachers submit all evidence? Our school has moved to Showbie for pupils. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in here, Eve. I think
Yes,
that
please.
should be fine. Yeah, it's fine for you to submit all the evidence. Obviously, the benefit of students submitting the evidence themselves within Glow is that there's less admin work for you. But if that's the only way that's possible for you to do it, then that is completely fine. We both had previous schools where the teacher, I believe this is the case for you as well, Eve, where we've had the teachers submit all the work for the students themselves. So yeah, that is possible.
So the other thing to mention on the assessment side of things is that the pupil work is marked by a KSB assessor, and then it's also internally verified by another member of staff, another trainer within Keep Scotland Beautiful. So there's a quality assurance across all the marking and all schools. So if you've run the course and you've really enjoyed it, got a lot out of it, and you want to present it again, then we are able to offer a slight shift in some of the of how that's done, so that on the second iteration there's a possibility for the teacher to do more of the marking, which reduces some of the administration workload, and it would be the Keep Scotland Beautiful trainer that would do the internal verification of the work that would normally be submitted. So there's a development process that if you think, well, that's a lot of administration, that can reduce over time. Both courses are externally quality assessed. So we have a quality assurance that were granted in June by the SQA. So that gives you some confidence that our processes are robust and fair. Both courses end with a request or a piece of work that supports the pupils to bring together their thoughts for continued action. So having gone through the course, and this is one thing that you mentioned before about we don't know what to do about these, that's exactly where we lead the pupils to, or these courses lead the pupils to, is to what can I do about this? So there's an opportunity to think about individual action. There's also an opportunity to think about how then can we come together and do something as a group. If you've already got an eco committee or another kind of committee who's active in school, you might want to alert them that if there was some actions coming up, you think, actually, we can't do this, but there's already a committee in the school that we could offer these to take, or join forces with, to take action on. Qualification, sorry, do you need approval to deliver this course to get the SQAF points.
I can jump in again, Eve.
Yes,
I was
yes.
just typing an answer there. So no, and we have a one-to-one meeting with each teacher prior to delivery, and that's really just an opportunity to kind of iron out how it's going to look. So ideally it being delivered on Teams, and a rough idea of timeline and how many students you're wanting to take through the course and things like that. And it's an opportunity for you to ask any questions about any of well, anything to do with the course. But once we've had that meeting and we've shared the resources with you, then you're free to then go and deliver the course, and any successful student will get those credit points.
And in addition to that, you might want to know that if you have senior pupil or pupils in senior phase that are taking the course and are successful, then the school gets the insight points as well. We're talking to the folks at Insight about that. So, and that's also available to the school for successful pupils in senior phase. And this I thought might be useful for you to have a look at. So as part of the feedback, when this was a draft, when we feed back to you, when we mark the work, we will feed back, and all pupils have a single opportunity to resubmit their work if they haven't quite succeeded. So here you can see, well, David Attenborough hasn't actually submitted his work for this, but Greta's passed it. And Steve Backshall, well, you know, he's partially successful, but he's still got a little bit of work to do. He's probably filming somewhere, so he'll come back to it when he's finished that. But that's an example of the sorts of feedback that you'll receive from us, that it'll be either a clear pass, or the purple here is they've done really well, and that's a good one to look at. That's a good example. And then the slightly the orangey kind of, I don't know what tone you'd call that, is where they haven't quite succeeded. Interesting, this green one, there was a pass, and there's a minimum number of correct answers, and they put in more answers than was necessary, and a couple of those weren't quite right. So that's why you get that's longer than just pass. So just very quickly, in terms of the biodiversity action course and how it might differ to the climate emergency one, the second learning outcome is mandatory to deliver that outside, and not just anywhere outside. It needs to be in as natural a setting as you can. So if you only have tarmac within the grounds, you'll maybe need to find a small patch of woodland, or I don't know if you have a beach near you or something like that, but an outdoor space where you've got some plant life, and you've got a chance of finding some animal life maybe as well, or some life in the soil or something. The other thing to let you know about that learning outcome is that your role as a teacher kind of shifts sideways. So you're more acting, I describe it more like being an orchestra conductor. So the pupils have the music, they know what they're doing, and you're kind of you're orchestrating them to play, effectively, to play the music, but also to play in the environment, to have their own questions, to have their own interpretation, to have their own direct experience of where they are. Ms. Muir, yes, they can. We tend to obviously like a school to start as close to the beginning of term as possible, so that you can complete within a term, but it's possible to start at any different points. Clearly, different schools will have different contact time with their classes, so there's a lot of flexibility that way. If you've got a lot of time with a class, then you can start later into the term. The other thing that's different with the biodiversity action course is that the work that is submitted for assessment is submitted as formative and summative work. So for the biodiversity action course, you'll be submitting work as you go along the way. So hopefully that feedback is awfully helpful to you as you progress. And then, yes, the potential, of course, to use your new knowledge and apply it within your school grounds, particularly because there's a learning outcome that needs to be in an outdoor space. That might be an obvious way for you to use some of the course and think, actually, we're going to develop a space or a resource in in the school grounds that we can use for this sort of learning and teaching. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Josh just now.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Eve. Yeah, I'll just give you a very brief kind of overview of the climate emergency training, and then we can run through some frequently asked questions, and then there's a chance for you guys to ask any more questions after that. So I'm not going to, we can share both of our courses with you. I should say, if it's not clear yet, Eve is the one who's in charge of the Biodiversity Action course, and I'm the one who's in charge of the climate emergency training. So we're not going to go into the actual, the real nitty gritty of the actual materials. You'll all have a chance to see them. But just a rough overview for the climate emergency training. It covers the carbon cycle, looks at carbon sinks and sources, and greenhouse gas emissions and carbon footprints as well. But as Eve was mentioning earlier on, we're also looking for students to finish with positive things that they feel they can do individually and collectively to make a difference. So that's a real big push in both of those courses. Mine is the climate emergency training one. It is more classroom based. And the final thing, it's always a bit difficult to kind of, it's a bit like licking your finger and sticking it in the wind to try and decide how long it will take for a course to run. But both courses are around a notional 15 hours worth of work, but obviously that does heavily depend on your students and the time that you have available, with them in the week, if you have many lessons with them or if it's once a week or something like that. But it's just worth bearing that in mind. Obviously, again, when you see the resources, you'll be able to get a clear idea of how long you think it will take for you and your students. I'm just seeing a few questions coming in. Has anyone run the course with pupils who have additional support needs? I haven't had, I can't speak for you, Eve. I haven't had anyone who has explicitly run the course with students who have additional support needs, but there's definitely have been individual students within classes who've got additional support needs. But as I said, I haven't had a whole class where that's been the case. I don't know. Do you want to jump in there, Eve?
Well, there was a cohort last year that was specifically for a class of pupils for social, emotional, behavioural needs, but they're representing it this year just with the particular circumstances of some of those young people involved. It wasn't a fit that worked in the end, so which is fine. So they were representing with a different group this year, and effectively there was an individual who was quite powerful within the group and quite a strong influence. So it was not to do with the course, not to do with the learning, but more to do with the functioning of the class. That was a very challenging group. So, I think, yeah.
Sorry, I was just going to say as well, I mean, we provide you with lots of resources, but you can, as long as for us, as long as the learning outcomes are hit, then actually how you decide to, you've got quite a lot of leeway in terms of how you decide to present the information, and also how you decide to record the students' evidence. And yeah, we would really love, we've got proformas to help students answer questions if that's suitable, but we would also love to see, as creative answers or them being able to answer, provide the evidence in the way that best represents them. So there's please don't feel like you can't do something with them, as long as it is hitting the learning outcomes, and you might want to run it by us first, just to double check, but I think we're pretty supportive and encouraging of that. I saw just a few more questions. So are the materials available to look at before deciding whether or not to run the course? Yes. So we'll talk a bit more about that after this. But if you want to run the course, then there's I'll share a link and you can register your interest, and then we can set up one-to-one meetings to have those specific conversations with you. But you'll definitely be able to see the resources before you decide to run the course. Nancy, I can see Are the courses independent? Yes. So there's the Biodiversity Action course, and there is the Climate Emergency Training course. They both run out of KSB. Eve and I obviously see each other and talk to each other all the time, and there are lots of similarities between the courses in terms of the administration and things like that. The actual content themselves is different. So I can see another thing. I was thinking of embedding it in the curriculum. Yes, that's definitely something that is possible, and I think it's something that people have done. Previous other schools have already done that as well. So it's definitely something that you can do. Just to
And
move
Nancy,
on to no, go on.
Sorry, just going to pop in here about there's been pupils from across the school that have taken part in that second learning outcome and done the activities outdoors, and I've yet to have anybody come back and say that they didn't enjoy it. That seems to be quite a powerful bit of learning for the young people that have done it so far.
Yes, so the and some frequently asked questions. The first one is that the course is free for all state schools. We have got a pricing matrix for independent schools, but for state schools, it's completely free. Just to again reiterate what Eve mentioned, the courses have been accredited by SQA at SCQF level 4, but they are run completely by us. We have our annual quality assurance, which is currently done by SQA, but the only evidence that the students will have of completing the course will be a certificate from us. It will have the SCQF logo on it. It will have the credit level on it. But you won't, the students at the end of year, when they get their SCQA, their SQA paper with all of their, grades on and things like that, then it won't appear on that. So it's our own course and it has been accredited by SQA, but it won't appear on any of their documentation. And for that, one of the reasons, because that we do ask for the students' SCN numbers, just so if for whatever reason they lose their certificate at some point in the future, then we can find their certificate for them, and also for higher students, then the SCN number allows us to contribute to insight data for them. In terms of, I can see a few more questions coming in. I'll just run through some frequently asked questions and then I'll come to those questions. In terms of timelines, ideally we would like it to be completed within a term, just because it helps us get a handle on when we'll need to roughly be doing marking and sending information back to you. But we do understand, obviously, that there's always extenuating circumstances. So I think the most important thing that we ask is just to keep us informed of any changes, especially when you think actually that you'll probably be bringing the whole course to an end, just so we can plan staff time accordingly to that. Obviously, one of the benefits of if you decide to run the course again, then you can do all of the assessment, and then we would only need to IV some of that work. So we would still need to have access to the team like we would in the first running of the course, but we'd only need to IV a smaller section of it, and then you actually have much more freedom really in terms of your timings, and because there's a smaller workload from us, it allows us to kind of be a bit more flexible as well. And the final thing was the age range. We're recommending that it's for students at S3 and above, and insight data is obviously available for students completing in S4 and above. But again, it's down to you, and you know your students best. So if you feel there are others outside of those ages who would suit that, then that's completely fine. So don't let that be a reason for not trying it with a class. This is just where when we were creating the courses, that's roughly where we were aiming them at, but it shouldn't prevent you from running it with other ages if you'd like. I can see a few more questions coming in. And this is coming on nicely to our any questions slide. So the credit points, the climate emergency training is 2 credit points. The biodiversity action course is 1 credit point. There's no real difference though between them. When they were accredited by individuals within the SQA separately. When the climate emergency training course was accredited, roughly 1 credit relates to about 10 hours worth of work. That's how they roughly do it. And they when the climate emergency training course was accredited, they said there was an assumed amount of student learning that would happen outside of the course, so it wasn't really taking into consideration just the teacher taught hours, but that was outside of our control. And yeah, so that's a great question from Fiona. So we've also run something called Climate Ready Classrooms, which I may have come in and delivered to some of you here. The climate emergency training basically came from the Climate Ready Classrooms workshop, which was a 1-day workshop, which was accredited by an organisation called the Carbon Literacy the Carbon Literacy Project. But we felt like it was more meaningful for school students to have accreditation from SCQF rather than an organisation based down in Manchester, which most of them had never heard of. So it hasn't replaced it. I can still come in and deliver a 1-day workshop on climate change with your students if you'd like, but I appreciate it's quite difficult to take a whole class of students off timetable for a whole day. And the benefit of both of these courses is that they're teacher-led. You get the resources from us. We can support you if needed, but you obviously your students, which type of teaching styles might work with them and things like that, and so you have much more control over that. Does anybody have any other questions based off what we've spoken about? I don't know if is there anything that you feel I might have missed off there, Eve?
No, I don't think so.
No.
I suppose if you want to maybe mention next steps, if people want to go forward.
Yeah. So, oh, 2 questions. Well, yeah, both courses are around 15 hours. Yes, I always find it difficult to say. I mean, Eve, you can speak for your course. I would say roughly, but again, it depends on, I don't know, the disruption that might happen within a school term and absences from some students and a whole host of things. We'll share the resources with you. What I've just posted in the chat now is a link that if you click on that, you can then register your interest for both of the courses independently. And then myself and Eve will be in touch with you to set up a meeting just to have another discussion, and it gives you a chance to ask any more questions. And after that, we'll share the resources with you, and then you can have a look at them, and you can then decide if you feel how long you feel that the course will take for your learners. But in terms of next steps, if you're interested in having another discussion and taking this forward, then please click on that link. You'll be able to fill out forms for both of our courses separately, and then myself and Eve will be in touch with you to take it forward. There isn't a cost for state schools, Nancy. So if you're a state school, completely free. If you're an independent school, then there are costs, but we can discuss that with you individually. That's okay, Mrs. Belford. I hope the Biology Study Support Group is going well. But yeah, thank you very much for joining. And like I said, yeah, please fill out those forms and get in touch with us. It's really great. It's really helpful for us also just to have discussions with teachers and to find out what's been working and what hasn't been working. We do really want to hear from you about which activities have really worked and which ones you think could be maybe changed in a little bit. Is there a minimum number that you have run the course with? I think so. I've had a group of 5 students who started, and then I think I had 1 student was a non-attender. So I think I ended up having 4 students who were actually submitting all of the coursework. That's the smallest. I've had a group up to the 25. If it's your first time running it, then we would I guess very heavily suggest that you just take 1 class through. It just makes it much easier for everyone. But then going forward, if you then run it and you think, actually, I want to put a whole year group through, then we can be very supportive of that on the second running. But again, just bear in mind that the larger the class size in the initial group, there's obviously more kind of marking and admin from our side, and especially as we're trying to get more and more people doing the course. I think our preferred way of doing it would be to take a single class through in the first time, and then if it works, then yeah, we're very open to you taking more groups through. But then obviously you can do a bit more of the marking, and that can make everything a bit more smooth. But that's all from me. I'll hand over back to you, Eve, if you have any final words to say. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today.
I don't think I do have any final words apart from I'm just really pleased that that you've joined us. And if you're still not sure, then please, I would encourage you to fill the form in and just have another chat with us. And having that chat with us, you might give you a better idea about the specifics for your situation, about how many pupils would be appropriate and when it might fit within your timetable. There's a number of presentations that you could consider across the school year. Some schools were looking at during transition time last year as an example. But thank you very much for joining. That's the main thing, really, and hope to pick up the conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Have a lovely afternoon, and yeah, look forward to speaking to you all soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye now.